While there's no doubt we're grateful for the police force and the way they handled the incidents that occurred last Saturday, there are still police forces who have been badly handling their duties and their roles as police officers. We're going to be reading into a special article from Byline Times of stories of some of those. This headline is "The Thin Blue Line of Accountability," and this is from Byline Times. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an article from Byline Times with the headline, "The Thin Blue Line of Accountability, How Citizens are Holding Britain's Broken Police Forces to Account." Who polices the police? Increasingly, it is community activities. Mitchell Grant speaks to cop watch groups on why they do it. Now, obviously, like I said, the police have a very difficult job. It is a very hard job. No one is denying that. However, there is also a line, and that line has been crossed numerous times by the police force over the last several years, countless times, under both political leaderships of Conservative and Labour. And I have always said that the Metropolitan Police is a police force, in my opinion, in particular to London, is a force that has failed in its responsibilities and duties and should be dissolved, and a new police force should be emerged from it, a brand new one from scratch. But what's police forces like outside of London? Well, we're going to be reading into some stories here in this article. So let's take a look, shall we? Walk through St Paul's area of Bristol and you will see ACAB. All cops are, I'll let you read that word, graffitied on the walls and wheelie bins. The tension between some of these parts of the city residents and the police force is palpable. In the 1980s, the area were scenes of civil unrest which resulted in 19 policemen and 6 others being hospitalised. Many in the community point to the overzealous stop and search policies and armed patrols targeting young black men used by the police as a key factor which led to the disturbances. Some feel over-policing of certain communities in Bristol continues today. Without a shadow of a doubt, guys, black people are targeted more than any other, and that's just blatantly racist. There's no two ways about it. It's blatant racism, point blank. And I don't care about statistics about whether it's... I don't care about statistics when people say that whether it's black people who are causing more crime, or black people are this and that and the other, whatever statistics you're going to throw. It's racist. Plain and simple. To finger point at just black people. Plain and simple. They beat me up and they broke my teeth. I didn't get a solicitor. I didn't know I was being arrested. I didn't get my rights. Didn't get read my rights. Alice's eyes tell the story of affliction as she recalls an armed raid Avon and Somerset police carried out on her house. They took 2 dresses, a bag and a hat, lying to me all throughout the event. I don't think I would be here if I hadn't been on the phone with a friend. Alice is one of 81,142 people in this country who have made an official complaint against the police over the last year. Just let that number sink in. 81,142 people have made an official complaint in the police this year. And by the way, this article is on the 13th of November. So by the time you watch this, that number will have gone up. Normally, when a complaint is made, it is dealt by a police force's own professional standards department. Bridget from Bristol Cop Watch tells me how the police are unique in their way when what they investigate themselves any wrongdoing, and explain how consequently officers are not held properly account of their actions. Perhaps the police's own professional standards department is not so. Perhaps an independent body should be handling the complaint commission rather than the police themselves. What do you guys think about that? Perhaps they should be separated. handled by a different body that has them. Not a private one, but an independent body of some sort that handles complaints, separate from the police, so that they're not influenced by police in any way, shape or form when it comes to dealing with complaints. Just a thought. Similarly, Habib Kari, a spokesperson for Stopwatch, a group that conducts research into police behaviour in England and Wales, tells me, "We find a lot of the time there is a massive accountability gap between the way the police should have behaved and the actual reality. The public have found it quite difficult to hold the police accountable and gain any real justice. Some communities have organised themselves to monitor and challenge police malpractice, such as organisation is Bristol Copwatch, the non-heterosexual organisation which was started 3 years ago to support people like Alice, who are in the process of making complaints against the police. Alice initially sought out Bristol Copwatch for advice, but on seeing the important role Copwatch could play in their communities, became a member. Bristol Copwatch works with people who are in custody or are about to appear in court by helping them seek appropriate legal representation. Dalia, a former paralegal specialist in prisoners' rights and members of the group, reflects on how she recently spoke to somebody who had just gone to prison. Just having somebody there who understands the legal process can be a huge offer of solidarity, she says. Bristol Copwatch also aims to empower citizens through holding public meetings, giving free Know Your Rights training courses and hosting stalls where they offer step-by-step guidance to people who may find themselves in an interaction with the police. Matt, who joined Bristol Copwatch over last year, explained how they conduct street monitoring, which involves filming police interactions. He described a recent incident where he noticed 2 members of the public getting arrested in Lawrence Hill. He started filming the interaction and very quickly the police had taken the people out of the handcuffs. "I'm not saying they got de-arrested because we were there," he paused before adding, "but I guess it's an example of how when we do things correctly, that's what can happen." So, stating here that they got handcuffed when they didn't need to, and as soon as they were recorded, they took them off, allegedly. Trouble on the Avon. Bristol Copwatch is just one part of a growing movement of Copwatch groups throughout the country. However, due to a string of high-profile incidences involving the city's police forces, Bristol Copwatch is among the country's busiest groups. Infamously, in 2017, Avon and Somerset police shot their own race relations advisor, Julia Ambry, with a stunt gun. A year later, Abduli was again mistaken for a wanted man by officers in Bristol. Fast forward to 2021, and during the aftermath of Kill the Bill demonstrations against anti-protest law, the city's police were forced to retract statements they made about supposed broken bones and punctured lungs, in which officers were said to have sustained during the protest. Later, an inquiry by MP Gerard Davis found that Avon and Somerset police had overreacted at the time and had misled the press and tried to mislead the inquiry. This is outrageous. Sounds like another police force that needs to be dissolved. They stood up in court without any culpability, crying and saying that they feared for their lives, Bridget said. Defendants included a yacht of young people who were literally mauled and bruised. Despite compelling evidence suggesting the police made a variety of mistakes during and after the protest, Bridget somberly recalls that people from those trials were sent to prison for 112 years collectively, and charges are still being laid as of this October. Meanwhile, the local force Avon and Somerset police failed to log 13,100 alleged offences in 2022. According to an inspectorate report this March, over 8,000 were violent and 420 were sexual. That's pretty, not good. Capital offences. James from Camden's Copwatch explains how one of the roles Copwatch groups must play in society on the digital front, by offering a counter-narrative to what's being said, or challenging views presented by the police and the mainstream media. The Copwatch movement is growing quickly in London, with groups in Camden, Lambeth and Southwark gaining impetus in response to high-profile murders of Sarah Everard and Chris Capper at the hands of the London Metropolitan Police officers. I've spoken on numerous occasions about the Metropolitan Police officers and how I feel about them, guys. And I'll just remind you guys again, they should be disbanded and a new police force should come in their place in London. Public consent is something that the British model of policing relies on, but some surveys have found people's trust in the police has fallen by 20% since 1981. This confidence in policing was further eroded during the recent undercover policing inquiry started by Theresa May, which found that at least 42 officers used fake personas based on the details of dead children. That's pretty despicable. To make undercover officers' fake identities more credible, the police were known to have visited neighbourhoods where the children lived, researched children's family members, and even visit graves. They would then use these details to obtain driving licences and passports in the name of the dead children. Tactics such as these, and the ones used by police to get close to families such as the parents of Stephen Lawrence, have meant the Met Police have been under increasingly public scrutiny. Yeah, like I said, guys, they need to go. It's pretty horrible. James also highlights how recently facial recognition technology has been used in Camden with no prior warning or apparent rules on how it's implemented. Effectively, the police are saying, well, if we're going to do it, you can trust us to get it right. But it doesn't have a particularly good success rate. It's untested, unreliable, unregulated technology. I'm just really concerned that people are walking around unaware of us, he tells Byline Times. Recently, the Met Police also adopted the Right Care, Right Person strategy, which aims to decrease the number of mental health calls officers attend as part of an initiative with the NHS. Back in Bristol, Bridget highlights how police in the city are still called to incidences which should be dealt with by support services, but each and every one of those have had their funding cut and cut and cut again. It almost sounds like familiar to austerity, doesn't it? Bridget lets out a deep breath. Why the hell is the police force sent out when somebody needs mental health support? And the one we know about, institutional racism. You know what I mean, guys. I apologise. Stopwatch is one such organisation helping members of the public hold the police to account. The group makes up of academics, lawyers and grassroots campaigns. Their research has been used in court cases, including during the case against the officer who shot Jermaine Baker. It was a terrible case. Stopwatch's investigation found that there was a problem with officers W80's defence and used examples to show that officers' defence would allow the police to get away with improper behaviour on very flimsy grounds. Habib tells me if Officer W80's threshold was the standard, every officer would get away with physically assaulting black people with nothing more than their own word and honest belief to go on. Unfortunately, it appears at least some of them do. During March 2021 and 22, there were nearly 88,000 complaints made against the police officers in the UK. Only 414 of the officers were found guilty of misconduct and 93 were dismissed from their jobs. So you had 83,000 of complaints were made and only 414 were found guilty of the misconduct. So you're going to tell me that large percentage were alright? That large amount? I'm struggling to be convinced by that. And only 93 were dismissed from their jobs. Despite this grim picture nationality, in July 2023, Sarah Cruz, Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset Police, offered some validation to over-policed communities in Bristol. Crew became the first Chief Constable in the UK to admit that her police force was an institutionally racist organisation. Dalia from Bristol Cop Watch said it had been long overdue, particularly in the black communities of Bristol, who had been receiving end of police violence, surveillance and brutality all those years. This has been going on and people don't talk about it. You know, you don't hear this on the mainstream media. This is normal for them. You don't hear it because they don't want the mainstream media don't want you to know about it. They don't want you to know that this is happening. They don't want you to know what the bad police officers are doing. Melody, another recent Bristol Cop Watch recruit, brands the move lip service. There were really specific things that day the police could have added in order to demonstrate that they were interested in institutional change. They could have committed to pulling back stop and search but not increasing armed patrols of racialised neighbourhoods, she said. But James from the Camden Cop Watch tells me that if he'd likened to have seen the Commissioner of the Met Police in London, Sir Mark Rowley, make a similar statement. However, Rowley's position is a politicised one. Unlike in Bristol, the Met Commissioner is appointed by the Home Secretary with the advice of the Mayor. Rowley has rejected calls to brand the Met Police institutionally racist. But most of us are lucky to be rarely affected by policing. We seldom have no reason to question it. But for the unlucky few, the way we have been treated by police has a profound effect on their lives and has led to the feelings of distrust and alienation towards the very people who are supported to protect them. This is the thing. He's the head of the commissioner is too. It is right that he has too politicised, and obviously this article was created at the time of the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, so it's important to make that distinction as well. But you know, the when mistakes are made, and when things are really bad, you have to hold your hands up when you are in charge. And while I understand that they want to protect the police officers, they also got to admit that there's a problem. They have to accept that there's a problem, and I don't think they accept it, and they accept it enough to realise that there needs to be change. Now, my position has always been is that dissolving the police force and building a new one up, and I'll explain at the end what I mean by that. So, who polices the police? See, this is the thing. Who holds accountability to police and their failings? Alice is one such person who is completely alienated from the police. She is keen to stress the solidarity cop watch groups can offer to victims of police brutality and urges people to join. Despite cop watch groups gaining members around the country, most surveys suggest that, on the whole, members of the British public still have faith in their police force. I put this point to the members of Bristol Cop Watch. Bridget counters unequivocally, if you join the police and you're thinking you're a nice person, sooner or later you're going to be asked to do something that is horrific. Alice has been arrested 7 times over the last 3 years for what she feels is simply a case of reporting her concerns. She describes her views on policing in Bristol plainly. The police have real grudges here. Rightly or wrongly, she expressed a shared view by some highly policed communities. The only good cop is an ex-cop. They've lost complete trust there. A spokesperson for the network of police monitoring NetPol tells Byline Times that recent reforms have proven worthless, and that recent walkout protests from firearm officers and murder charges were brought against the police officers who killed Chris Crabber showed the public once again that the police believe basic accountability doesn't apply to them. It's people in our communities who are able to hold the police to account most effectively, from legal observers at protest groups to cop watch groups. Police monitoring work has never been more important, the NetPol spokesperson adds. Until these forces clean up their acts, group like Cop Watch will be needed to watch the watchers. So, it sounds like to me that they need the same policy that I suggested about the Metropolitan Police. So what was my proposal? So my proposal was, and I've said this in before in the videos, but for those who haven't seen previous videos. So the proposal that I have as the Metropolitan Police is that to dissolve it. Now you can't just completely get rid of it, because you have to have a police force. Yeah, otherwise your crime will be rampant, obviously. That's the thing. But what you would do is you as you wind down a police force, you build up a brand new one. But what you have to do is you have to involve government, you have to involve communities, you have to involve 1 or 2 officers from the previous force. You can't just not have every single police officer. And it has to be a joint work together thing. It's got to be with communities, it's got to be with local councils, local government, as well as government, police, and 1 or 2 ex-police officers from the previous force, so that a new force can be built from the ground up. Brand new police force, and encourage and bring in a new kind of police force, that one that embeds itself within the communities that it works in. And you slowly get rid of the one that is causing disruption. And you don't bring back the vast majority of the police officers from the Metropolitan Police. You only do that based on their records. And there's quite a records there. I would say only based on their records. If they have very good records, then perhaps you can bring them over. But if they have bad records, or they've had complaints, then they should not be given another opportunity elsewhere. And this is the same concept that we need to apply to the other police force in Bristol, because the complete and total, because based on this story there is complete and total loss of trust here. And the thing is, this is just one area that's being talked about? How many other areas are having the same issues that are not being talked about? How do we know this ain't happening in Newcastle? How do we know it's not happening in Manchester? How do we know it's not happening in Birmingham? Just 3 other cities I could example. In England in particular, specifically. How do we know this ain't happening elsewhere? Because they're not talking about it. And the reason we know about this one in Bristol is because Byline Times are talking about it. That's the issue. Is that these have been happening and people aren't talking about it. And it's just not good enough in any way, shape or form. And don't get me wrong, and I've said this before about the police officers, and I'm going to say it again, yeah, before people think I'm anti-police or I have something against police officers. There are some very good police officers out there who do some fantastic work. They do wonderful work and deserve absolute credit, yeah, for what they do. However, we have some really bad police officers. We have some really terrible police officers out there, some really cruel ones. There are good officers, and don't get me wrong, there are some good ones. But my God, reform is not the answer anymore. It is dissolve and rebuild. That is what I believe we should be done. No more reform. Start from scratch. But what do you guys think? What do you make of this story? Do you guys believe the story? Do you think it's more than just Bristol and London? Do you think it's happening all over the UK and it's just not talked about in the mainstream media? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below and what you think of my thoughts as well. Hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share across social media and hit the bell notification icon and you'll be notified of when I upload another video. Thank you very much for watching and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.